Long before martial arts became a global phenomenon, before samurai culture captivated Western imagination, there was a masterless samurai whose undefeated record of over 60 duels and philosophical treatise, the Book of Five Rings, became perhaps the most influential martial text in history. You can only fight the way you practice. Japan, early 17th century. The tumultuous Sengoku period had ended. The Tokugawa shogunate consolidated power, and most samurai had transitioned from battlefield warriors to peacetime bureaucrats. In this era of relative stability, one man continued to perfect the true essence of the warrior's path. Miyamoto Musashi, with his unkempt appearance, solitary lifestyle, and unconventional techniques, was an unlikely legend. Born in 1584 in Harima Province, Japan, to a family of modest samurai status, he claimed his first victory in a duel at age 13. Though he mastered multiple weapons and arts, he often fought with wooden swords or even carved oars against opponents wielding steel. Yet something drove Musashi beyond conventional warrior training, a relentless dedication to understanding the fundamental principles underlying combat and, by extension, life itself. There is nothing outside of yourself that can ever enable you to get better, stronger, richer, quicker, or smarter. Everything is within, everything exists. Seek nothing outside of yourself. According to historical accounts, the insight that led to his unique two-sword style came after years of reflection. Why limit oneself to conventional methods when both hands could be employed? The complete martial framework would take decades to develop, but this simple question would transform swordsmanship and strategic thinking forever. Musashi would go on to establish his Niten Ichi Ryu, Two Heavens as One, school of swordsmanship, and author his classic, The Book of Five Rings. Near the end of his life, he would later develop his philosophy beyond mere combat techniques to encompass strategy, aesthetics, and spiritual cultivation, a comprehensive approach to mastery in all domains. Through direct experience of countless life-or-death encounters and profound reflection on their meaning, he revolutionized how practitioners understand martial arts. His conclusion? True mastery operates according to principles that often contradict conventional training but reveal themselves through simplicity and effectiveness in practice. Consider how revolutionary this approach was. In a martial culture that increasingly valued elaborate techniques and ritual, Musashi emphasized absolute simplicity and practical effectiveness. In an age that revered traditional lineages and formal schools, he advocated learning from nature itself and testing everything in actual combat. Musashi's first lesson. True breakthrough begins with the willingness to question traditional methods. The moment you accept prevailing techniques as fixed is the moment you limit yourself to merely copying others rather than achieving genuine mastery. You must understand that there is more than one path to the top of the mountain. If you had visited Musashi in his later years, you wouldn't have found elaborate training halls or numerous students, but a simple dwelling, perhaps basic writing implements, and a man engaged in deep reflection, practicing the arts of calligraphy, painting, and tea ceremony with the same mind that had conquered every opponent. Unlike conventional martial artists focused on perfecting predetermined forms, Musashi wasn't primarily interested in accumulating techniques within existing frameworks. He was interested in discovering the underlying principles that connected all approaches to combat. What made this approach so powerful? Musashi wasn't focused on mastering individual skills in isolation. He understood that true mastery doesn't come from collecting more techniques, but from seeing the essential principles that unite seemingly disparate arts. Today is victory over yourself of yesterday. Tomorrow is your victory over lesser men. This constant self-improvement allowed him to see possibilities that others missed, not because they lacked training, but because they stopped questioning their own methods too soon. When he developed his two-sword style, Musashi wasn't trying to create a flashy new technique. He was addressing the fundamental question of how to maximize one's resources in combat. The approach emerged not from trying to impress others, but from recognizing inefficiencies in traditional swordsmanship that others had simply accepted. Musashi's second lesson, transformative insight, comes from seeing connections across domains, not specialized expertise alone. Cultivate the habit of seeking principles that transcend specific contexts, questioning methods others take for granted. In strategy, it is important to see distant things as if they were close and to take a distanced view of close things. For all his legendary martial prowess, Musashi maintained a profound appreciation for the aesthetic dimension of the warrior's path. His work wasn't driven by mere combat effectiveness, but by a deep understanding of the integration between martial skill and artistic sensibility. Musashi recognized that artistic practice, particularly painting, calligraphy, and poetry, wasn't merely cultural refinement for a warrior, but essential training for developing the perceptive awareness and balanced mind necessary for combat mastery. In his final years, he created remarkable ink paintings and calligraphy that embodied the same principles found in his swordsmanship. Though known primarily as a swordsman, he maintained what we might call a unified field of mastery that informed all his pursuits. Unlike some warriors who might view different arts as separate domains, Musashi maintained that the principles of the sword pervaded all worthy activities. The relationship between Musashi's martial and artistic practices reveals much about his integrated worldview. Though renowned for his deadly skills, he emphasized that the highest level of strategic mastery was winning without fighting, achieving objectives without unnecessary conflict. Musashi's third lesson, cultivate breadth alongside depth. True mastery emerges from the integration of seemingly unrelated disciplines. Challenge yourself to see beyond technical prowess to the deeper principles that connect disparate fields of human endeavor. Do not regret what you have done. Even as he perfected the warrior's arts, Musashi maintained a remarkably disciplined perspective on the relationship between practice and daily life. He had little patience for luxury or comfort, often sleeping outdoors, eating simple food, and owning minimal possessions. In his practical guide, Dokudo, The Path of Aloneness, written shortly before his death, Musashi outlined 21 precepts for living, including: accept everything just the way it is, do not seek pleasure for its own sake, and do not under any circumstances depend on a partial feeling. These weren't mere philosophical musings, but a deliberate strategy to maintain absolute clarity and readiness. This focus extended to his approach to combat and training. While others might adjust their techniques to match current fashions or seek shortcuts, Musashi maintained remarkable consistency in his core principles, advocating for simplicity, directness, and constant awareness. Yet Musashi wasn't rigidly dogmatic. He understood that martial principles must ultimately connect with practical application. When new insights emerged from his experiences, he incorporated them. When circumstances changed, he adapted his approach while maintaining his fundamental values. Musashi's fourth lesson: maintain disciplined consistency in your daily practices. Find balance between preserving core principles and adapting to changing circumstances. Simplify your life to preserve energy and clarity for what matters most. Generally speaking, the way of the warrior is resolute acceptance of death. Perhaps Musashi's most enduring quality was his unflinching confrontation with mortality and willingness to embrace uncertainty. Though capable of extraordinary martial precision, he valued the attitude of the beginner's mind even after decades of undefeated combat. This embrace of uncertainty reflected a profound understanding that mastery advances not through acquiring fixed knowledge, but through constant readiness to encounter the unknown. Musashi understood that each conflict presented unique circumstances rather than providing opportunities to apply memorized techniques. Consider his famous duel with Sasaki Kojiro, in which he arrived deliberately late, used a wooden sword carved from a boat oar, and employed psychological tactics to unsettle his skilled opponent. This wasn't mere trickery, but demonstrated his principle that true strategy transcends technical skill alone. This combination of absolute commitment and mental flexibility characterized his entire approach. According to accounts, Musashi maintained consistent confidence in the fundamentals of his style, while continuously refining its application based on direct experience. His interest in what we might call the boundaries of conventional approach was evident in his famous rejection of specialized focus. While most schools emphasized perfecting particular weapons or techniques, Musashi insisted on mastering multiple weapons and understanding the strengths and weaknesses of each. Musashi's fifth lesson: embrace mortality and uncertainty as the foundation for genuine mastery. True advancement comes not from accumulating techniques, but from developing the mental readiness to face any situation. Cultivate both absolute commitment and complete flexibility. The ultimate legacy of Musashi's life is that this quintessential warrior became, in his final years, a profound philosopher and artist. As Japan entered a long period of peace, Musashi transformed his battle-tested insights into principles applicable far beyond the context of mortal combat. This leads to what we might call the Musashi paradox. How could someone so deeply immersed in the brutal reality of life or death duels develop such refined aesthetic sensibility and philosophical depth? How could a man who lived by the sword articulate principles that continue to guide leaders, artists, and seekers centuries after the samurai era ended? In a sense, this tension perfectly embodies Musashi's legacy. He wasn't driven primarily by bloodlust or ambition, but by deep commitment to understanding the fundamental principles of strategy, conflict, and mastery. Principles that transcend specific historical contexts or domains of application. When he stated that the ultimate aim of martial arts is not having to use them, Musashi expressed his conviction that the deepest mastery ultimately transcends the very skills upon which it was built. More than 4 centuries after his death, practitioners of disciplines ranging from martial arts to business strategy still study Musashi's writings. His emphasis on direct experience over theory, adaptation over rigid form, and principle over technique remains perhaps the greatest contribution to understanding the nature of strategic mastery. These insights remain as vital today as they were in Musashi's time. In an age of increasing specialization and technical complexity, the Musashi approach, seeking underlying principles across seemingly disparate fields, valuing direct experience over theoretical knowledge, and questioning fundamental assumptions rather than merely refining established techniques, is more essential than ever. What if you approached your work with Musashi's mindset? What if you valued direct testing alongside theoretical understanding? What if you persistently questioned methods others take for granted? What if you sought underlying unity in apparently disparate skills? What if you trusted that simplicity and effectiveness often signal closer approximation to truth than complexity and elaboration? Consider this. Musashi transformed martial arts not primarily through superior strength or speed, but through conceptual clarity and unflinching pragmatism. He did it by seeing familiar conflicts in fundamentally new ways, by recognizing patterns and connections that others missed, not for lack of technique, but for lack of perception and principle. You may never achieve Musashi's level of martial mastery, but you can bring the same quality of disciplined focus and principle-based thinking to your own field. You can choose to test assumptions rather than merely accept them, to seek underlying patterns rather than merely accumulating techniques. Musashi once described the warrior's mind as the everyday mind, emphasizing that true mastery isn't a specialized state, but the perfection of ordinary awareness. Perhaps his greatest lesson is that advancement ultimately depends not just on specialized training, but on integrating principles into every aspect of life. Remember, the goal isn't to become Musashi, but to follow his example by cultivating the disciplined mind and unwavering principles that allow genuine mastery to emerge. If you found value in today's exploration of Musashi's wisdom, consider how you might apply these 5 lessons in your own life. Question conventional methods that others take for granted, recognizing that transformative insight often begins with challenging traditional approaches. Seek connections across different domains, recognizing that principles often transcend specific applications and contexts. Integrate technical skill with aesthetic sensibility, recognizing that true mastery manifests across multiple dimensions of human activity. Maintain disciplined consistency in daily practice while remaining adaptable to changing circumstances. Embrace mortality and uncertainty as the foundation for genuine mastery, valuing readiness over fixed technique. Pick just one of these principles to practice this week. Notice how it changes your approach to challenges and possibilities in your own domain of expertise or interest. Until next time, learn from the path of the sword to create an extraordinary life. In all things, have no preferences. Miyamoto Musashi.